Hello everybody, welcome back to another podcast. As you can see, I'm back with video as promised. After my jet-lagged few podcast last week, I am here to talk box office again. So let's get right to it. So last weekend we have the release of 4 movies. We have A Little, it's the comedy starring Regina Hall about a body switching comedy of some sort where she became little, right? And then the Hellboy remake, reboot, sequel, something like that. And then after what's after about? Oh, it is a YA based on a book about a romance between two teenagers. And then there is the latest Leica Studios claymation Missing Link. Let's see how those movies did at the box office. Alright, let's jump right in. Coming in at number 1 is Shazam. It pulled in 25.1 million over the weekend, a 53% drop off from its opening weekend. Domestic gross right now is 94 million, and let's see, worldwide it is at 259 million with 164 million of that from overseas. So this movie might look hokey in the trailers, the promos, but it did surprisingly well, right? It opened to 53 million, which is sort of in line with some of the other DC movies, like Aquaman, which opened to about 67 million. So it's about there, and Shazam is sort of a lesser known character than Aquaman because, hey, the Aquaman at least is part of the Justice League, and he had a big part to play in Dawn of Justice, as well as his own movie Aquaman, which was released couple months ago in December, right? So that did pretty well. The Aquaman movie did surprisingly well, by the way. And Shazam, this movie seems like, unlike the other movies, it's really jokey, didn't take itself seriously. Not the dark and gritty movies that Zack Snyder did with the other characters in his DC movies, right? And they broke the mold, sort of. That you don't have to be dark and gritty like Nolan's Batman movies. So it did well, all right, but it dropped off about 53% in its second weekend, which is kind of in line with the huge drop off, right? But it is kind of a bit lower, which is a bit lower, with the other superhero movies, right? I mean, there's not Wonder Woman where that movie, drops sub 50s, but 53% is actually not bad for a second weekend drop for a movie that opened so huge, right? So pretty good going for Shazam, whose budget is only 100 million. So it's doing its job pretty much. Let's see if it could sustain this momentum, right? All right, let's move on to number 2, which is A Little, the comedy starring Regina Hall, where she is cursed. Her character is cursed by a teenager. She is this very bossy character. Everybody hates her. Her workers, every person that comes in contact with her disliked her, right? But she is cursed to live her life again as a teenager, and she gets to relearn some life skills pretty much. And Marsai Martin stars as her teenage self, and she got good reviews. Martin did for her portrayal of this younger Regina Hall character, right? But unfortunately, this movie isn't that well reviewed. It has a 48% on the tomato meter and a B plus cinema score, which is an average grade for cinema score as far as cinema score goes, right? So I said this movie could probably open somewhere in the 25 to 30 million range because I thought it was funny. Apparently people agreed with the critics, and this movie only opened up to 15.5 million, right? Which is still a decent opening, right, for a movie that didn't feature like a lot of star power, right? The star of the show is pretty much a teenage Regina Hall played by Marsai Martin, and as far as that goes, she did pretty well kind of pulling in this movie together. And I guess one of the reviews says that there's too little Regina Hall, and I think that's one of the problems. I mean, Martin did a great job, except that people sort of want to watch some names in this movie as well. I mean, she did a good job, but she probably couldn't hold everything together as such, right? I mean, because Hall's character is so fiery and memorable in the opening moments, and then suddenly they switch characters, and it turned into a kids movie pretty much, right? So that's 15.5 million. It's decent opening, but budget's only 20 million, so it's going to do well for itself, right? Let's see how well this movie holds up in the second weekend. Usually, it's going to be greater than 50% drop off in the second weekend, but we will see if this one can buck the trend. All right, number 3 is Hellboy, which is the disappointment for me. It pulled in 12 million in its opening weekend. I say this movie could probably open up in the 30 to 35 million range. The reason being is that the previous Hellboy movie back in 2008, which is like a lifetime ago, right, opened up to 34 million. And at the trailer, I thought it was kind of funny. Maybe all the good bits is in the trailer. And maybe that is true because reviews for this movie are terrible, because 15% on the tomato meter, which is ranks it as one of the lowest reviewed movie ever on the site, right? And a C cinema score. So so it doesn't work out. Reviews, word of mouth is not good for this movie, so that's why the opening is only 12 million. Drop off second weekend, it's gonna be huge because you don't have the reviews going for it. The opening buzz for this movie is not there, right? If it opened to huge numbers, I mean, people might want to check it out based on curiosity alone, and just because Hellboy is not that well known of a character, I'm not sure that there are that many fans of Hellboy out there, right? The first movie, when Ron Perlman played the character, right? The first movie opened to 23 million, went on to make 59 million domestically and 99 million worldwide. The second movie, like I said, opened to 34 million, went on to make 75 million domestic and 160 million worldwide. So you can see that it trended up, except that the domestic gross isn't that huge in the first place, right? Domestic gross, first movie 59 million, second movie 75 million. So even though it went up, it didn't blow out. So it haven't reached kind of like the Marvel level, even though that's hard to reach, right? It hasn't reached the blockbuster level, right? Crossing the 100 million barrier. And then such a long time between movies. 2008 was the last movie, so that's a long way to go, right? People who are fans probably moved on to other things and they're no longer interested in this character. And there are fans of Ron Perlman as well, Ron Perlman's portrayal of this character. And this one is played by David Harbour, who might do well, as the latest Hellboy, but he is no Ron Perlman in some fans' eyes, right? So there you go for Hellboy. So this reboot doesn't do as well. The budget for this movie is 50 million. Let's see how well it does overseas. If this franchise is going to be saved, it has to be done by the overseas market. Alright, number 4 is the horror movie Pet Sematary, the remake of Stephen King's novel. It pulled in about 10 million in the second weekend. Drop off is almost 60%. Domestic gross is about 41 million. But the budget is only 21 million, so it's doing okay, right? And worldwide, it already took in about 77 million, with 35 million of that from overseas. So for a movie that cost 21 million and already, raked in 76 million and ongoing, it's doing pretty well. It's doing pretty well for a remake. Alright, number 5 is Dumbo. It pulled in about 9.2 million in its third weekend. Drop off is about roughly 50% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 90 million. And worldwide it is at 266 million, with 177 million of that from overseas. But the budget is 170 million, which is kind of high for a movie that only took in 266 million worldwide. So it still has ways to go to break even, right? Conventional wisdom and all saying that you need to make 2 times the budget worldwide to break even. just to break even, right? And it's not doing its job domestically, and overseas it's not pulling in that huge number as well, but it's still early, so let's see if this little elephant can fly at the box office worldwide. All right, number 6 is Disney's or Marvel's Captain Marvel. It pulled in 8.6 million in its 6th weekend. Drop off is relatively low, about 31% from the previous week. Domestic gross is 386 million, and worldwide, it's about 1 billion. Give or take, right? With 678 million from overseas. So yeah, Disney Marvel managed to pull another one out of their hat to make this into a success, and look for Captain Marvel to play a bigger role in the forthcoming Avengers movie Endgame. Alright, number 7, moving along, is Us, the latest horror movie by Jordan Peele. It pulled in about 7 million in its 4th weekend. Drop off is about 50% from the previous week. Domestic gross 163 million, and worldwide it is at 235 million, with 72 million of that from overseas. So high domestic take, foreign it's kind of a bit lower. Normally you see high foreign takes, foreign box office than domestic, but this is a horror movie which don't really travel that well overseas, but it's still doing plenty well enough for a horror movie, right? 72 million, and the budget for this movie is only 20 million, so it's another feather in the cap, so to speak, for director Jordan Peele and his horror movies. So again, he has earned this reputation for this master of horror, this new master of horror, right? All right, number 8 is After. It is based on a novel by Ann Todd. It's in the YA genre, and as I said, the YA genre hasn't been doing that well in theaters, with exceptions of like The Hunger Games and one of the Divergent movies, but they all kind of fell off a cliff afterwards. But there are some exceptions, right? Like 5 Feet Apart, which opened to 13 million. And it did okay right afterwards. But this looks like another one that's fall into the category that just appears in the box office and fell off. So After pulled in about 6.2 million, open to 6.2 million, and I say this movie would open to 5, and it's just right there. Reviews wise, not good. 15% on the tomato meter, which is kind of like Hellboy, 15%, but a B cinema score. So as you can see, fans are more generous than the critics, but still not there. Expect this movie to kind of drop off again, huge, but then again, there's not much to drop off. It's only 6 million, and usually the second weekend drop off is usually over 50%. A good thing going for this movie is that it probably doesn't cost that much to make. The budget for this movie is probably not that high, and maybe fans will catch it on streaming, home video, what have you. All right, let's move along to number 9, which is the best reviewed movie of the new releases, Missing Link, and it's probably the lowest opening movie of the new releases as well, with 5.8 million weekend, right? Reviews wise, it's okay, right? 88% on tomato meter and a B plus cinema score. The latest movie from Leica Studio, the people who brought you Corpse Bride, Caroline, Kubo, and the Two String, among others. And if you've seen the trailer, this looks like the smoothest one of them yet. The animation is smooth, but it's still stop motion animation, and as I've said in the past, there is a cap on stop motion animation. It's just probably not that appealing. People seen these animation from the Pixar's, Disney's, Illumination, etc., and it's smooth, and it's cute, right? But Missing Link has the distinct Leica Studio, I guess, style, and that's probably for some reason or another, when compared to offerings by the other major animation studios, is lacking. And still, I say this movie could probably open to about 10 million, because that's what movies usually open to. This one opened lower even still, right, to 5.8 million. Hopefully it can sustain itself in theaters and probably close out in the 40 million range or so. Alright, let's close out with number 10, The Best of Enemies, starring Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell. Henson plays a civil rights activist, and Atwater, who went up against the KKK. Right, reviews wise, is about 55% on the Tomato Meter A cinema score. So kind of like the audience scores are there for this movie. But it's more of a art house movie in this sense, right? So it pulled in 2 million in the second weekend for domestic gross of about 8 million, but the budget is only about 10 million. All right, so that's it for the opening top 10. Let's move on to the new releases. I believe we're going to have 3. We're going to have Breakthrough, which is opening on a Wednesday, and it is a faith-based film. And then there is the documentary from the Disney nature label, Penguin. As you can tell by the titles, it's about penguins. And then also opening on a Wednesday, by the way. And opening on Friday is Curse of La Llorona, which is a horror movie that is produced by James Wan, and it's based on a Mexican fairy tale, I guess. Alright, let's start off with Penguins. It's a documentary about penguins. What can you say? They follows one penguin who the documentary's named Steve, as he went through life, I guess, and find a mate, have kids. So with this type of documentaries, they usually open around 5 million or so, with the rare exception of Chimpanzee, which is about chimpanzee, which opened around 10. But all the others kind of range between 5, 6, 8. So this one's about penguins, cute animal, right? But as with all the other documentaries, I think this one's gonna fall under, right? So it's probably gonna have an opening that's around 5 or under, around there. Alright, up next is Breakthrough, opening on a Wednesday. Based on a true story, it's a faith-based film about a teenager who fell into ice-cold freezing lake and submerged for 15 minutes, and they brought him up lifeless, right? And this faith of his mom, or adopted mom, had for him, and of all his friends, the neighbors, they all pray for him, and a miracle happened, and he came back to life. Supposedly based on a true story. And this movie is brought to us by the producer who gave us Miracles from Heaven. Except that movie had a Jennifer Garner, Queen Latifah, Eugenio Derbez. This one has Topher Grace, right? Miracles from Heaven opened to 50 million, and I don't think this one is gonna have that huge of an opening. But this movie is, I guess, targeted toward the faithful, the people, in church, Christianity, what have you, right? And all the other denominations. Faith-based film, as I said. Like I said, it's not going to open to 50 million. I think it's probably going to open to somewhere in the 8 to 10 million, because again, Miracles from Heaven had some of the bigger names, and this one doesn't have those big names. So 8 to 10 opening for Breakthrough. Alright, let's close out the new openings with the horror movie The Curse of La Llorona. It is produced by James Wan, as I said, and this movie produced by James Wan has been doing pretty well, right? And a horror movie based on a Mexican legend about a woman who drowned her children and who drowned herself, but she lived on as this vengeful spirit who, I guess, kidnapped children to replace her own that she killed. So how will this one do? Currently at Rotten Tomatoes, this movie is at 38%. So reviews wise, it's not that good. But as you can see, sometimes horror movies or review proof, there are fans of these movies. They defy expectations of people who just look at reviews. And like I say, James Wan produced movie typically do pretty well. And I think this one is going to be no exception, but I think it's not going to do as well as his other movies, horror movies, like the Saw series, like the Conjurings, because this one's not directed by him, it's only produced by him. So expectations is going to be lower for this movie. So 25 million opening for the Curse of La Llorona. Alright, so that's it for this week's podcast. Tune in next week to see how I did. Until then, take care. Bye bye.